parents gave their entire estate to my sister because I was too independent. My parents gave our family's entire 4-generation wine estate to my sister, all because they decided my success in the tech world was intangible and temporary. So, my grandmother shocked the entire family into silence when she calmly wrote me a $5 million check right at the party, before cutting my parents completely out of her massive will. The air in my family's wine cellar that night was so thick you could almost taste it. It tasted of fine Cabernet Sauvignon, of old money, and the bitter aftertaste of unspoken lies. Ancient stone walls, cool and slightly damp to the touch, rose into a vaulted ceiling where shadows clung like ancient spiders. The scent of aging oak from the barrels mingled with the rich, earthy smell of the cellar floor and the sharp, fruity aroma of the wine being poured. My father, Vincent DeLuca, was raising his glass. The light from an iron chandelier danced on his large gold ring, casting cold flecks of light across the room. It was my parents' 35th wedding anniversary, an event that should have been filled with warmth. But all I felt was a chill that sank deep into my bones, colder than the autumn wind howling through the Sonoma Valley outside. My stomach twisted into a cold, hard knot. I was used to this feeling. It always showed up at these rare family gatherings, where everyone wore expensive clothes and well-rehearsed smiles. The reason for tonight? My parents had hinted at an important announcement regarding the future of the DeLuca estate, a legacy that had survived 4 generations. My Aunt Elena caught my eye from across the table, her smile as tight and thin as a wire. She, like the others, was a master of pretending. We were all actors in a play my parents directed. My sister, Isabella, was the star of the show. She was the center of the universe. She sat there, stunning in a wine-red silk dress, her glossy black hair in a perfect updo, her skin seeming to emit a light of its own. She laughed, a musical sound that was practiced to perfection, touching our father's arm as he fawned over her. She accepted the compliments from our relatives like a queen accepting tribute, a mysterious smile playing on her lips. It was a smile that said she knew a secret the rest of us didn't. And the worst part was, I knew that secret had something to do with me. Watching her, I couldn't help but feel the familiar sting of being overshadowed. Isabella had always been my parents' golden child. I remembered her 10th birthday. She'd smashed a priceless antique vase in a fit of temper, and my parents had consoled her, buying her a pony the next day to cheer her up. A month later, I was grounded for 2 weeks for getting a B+ in history. That was the ecosystem of our family. Isabella's flaws were charming quirks, while my achievements were merely the expected standard. Meanwhile, I, Elara, had learned early on that independence and relentless hard work were my only allies. I had built a tech company from scratch with my own 2 hands, a world of code and algorithms that my parents never bothered to understand. To them, my success was something foreign, abstract, and perhaps unsettling. Just before dinner, my mother had cornered me. "We're so glad you could pull yourself away from your computer screens for a real family event, dear," she'd said, patting my cheek with a condescending sweetness. A real event, as if my entire life's work was a silly game. The formalities dragged on. The smell of roasted lamb with rosemary mixed with the cloying sweetness of expensive perfume was starting to make me sick. Just as I was debating whether sneaking out for some fresh air would be too obvious, my father tapped his fork against his crystal wine glass. The sound, clear and sharp, cut through the murmurs, demanding silence. "My dearest friends, my family," he began, his voice booming with practiced charisma. 35 years ago, I married the most incredible woman, Sophia." He paused for a round of applause. "Together, we have not only built a life, but we have been custodians of a legacy of soil, of sun, of the vine." My mother, Sophia, stood beside him, her face glowing with a strange excitement that immediately put me on guard. She placed a hand on his arm, the perfect picture of a supportive matriarch. They began their speech with flourish, weaving elegant words about family legacy, about the DeLuca bloodline and the importance of keeping this land alive. My father spoke of his father and his father before him, painting a picture of an unbroken chain of succession. I listened, every nerve in my body pulled taut like a string, because I knew this wasn't just a nostalgic speech. It was a preamble to an execution. And then, the bombshell was dropped. "It is with immense pride," my father declared, his chest puffed out, "that we announce our decision to pass the torch. The future of the DeLuca estate, the winery, the brand, everything, will be entrusted to the hands of our daughter, Isabella. Not half, not even a small symbolic share for me. Everything." The air was sucked out of my lungs. The murmurs around the table died into a thick, profound silence. My ears were ringing as I tried to process their reasoning. My father continued, his voice thick with false solemnity. "Isabella has a spiritual connection to this land. She understands the heartbeat of the vines in a way that can't be taught. It must be felt." My mother chimed in, her voice honey-sweet, but every word was a knife's edge. "Isabella has wonderful plans to grow the brand in a traditional way, to honor our heritage." Then, as if it were an afterthought, she turned to me. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, which were filled with a cold, hard pity. "And you, our dear Alara, we are so proud of you. You've built your own world. You're strong. You're independent. You don't need the burden of this land." The burden. They called a 4-generation legacy a burden. The words felt like a slap in the face. They had twisted my hard work into an excuse to disinherit me. My father even added, a final nail in the coffin. "Your world is digital, intangible, Alara. Your successes come and go like trends, but the land is forever. Isabella understands that." The cellar suddenly felt suffocating, the stone walls closing in on me. I managed to find my voice, my throat dry and raw. "Why do you think this is fair?" My voice was shaky, no matter how hard I tried to keep it calm. My father let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Fairness is for children, Alara. This is about legacy." "Don't be dramatic, dear," my mother added, her voice dropping to a patronizing whisper. "We've provided for you in other ways. We gave you the education that allowed you to become so self-sufficient. In a way, your independence is our gift to you." Isabella, of course, couldn't miss this opportunity to twist the knife. She stood up, her silk dress rustling, and walked over to me. She placed a hand on my shoulder, her touch feeling heavy and possessive. Her perfectly manicured nails dug lightly into my skin. "Oh, Alara, sweetie." Her voice was syrupy, her head tilted with faux concern. "Don't be sad. I'll take good care of the place. And I promise, every year I'll send you a case of a limited edition, the Alara Reserve. On the house, of course." A dry, bitter laugh almost escaped my lips. She had just named a wine after me, like a charity act, on the very land that should have been partly mine. It was a public humiliation, a masterfully disguised power play. A smattering of applause, thin and brittle like dry leaves, broke out around the room. I saw my uncle suddenly become fascinated by the wine swirling in his glass. Aunt Elena offered me a tight, pained grimace that was supposed to pass for a smile. No one met my eyes. I sat there, stunned and humiliated, while my parents and my sister basked in their self-congratulatory glow. I looked down at my hands, the fingers that had typed millions of lines of code to build my own career, my own world. They were right. I had made my own world, because I was never truly welcome in theirs. And tonight, they had officially exiled me from it. I glanced at the old DeLuca family crest, carved into the largest oak barrel at the far end of the cellar. For the first time in my life, I felt no connection to it. The cold stone walls seemed to whisper a harsh truth. Here, I was just a stranger. The humiliation from Isabella's offer hung in the air, as toxic and colorless as gas. The hesitant applause had died out, leaving behind a silence that was even worse. It was thick, suffocating, pressing in on my chest. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, not with sympathy, but with a morbid curiosity, waiting to see how the wounded animal would react. I sat frozen, my hands clenched under the table, my nails digging so deep into my palms that I felt a sharp sting, and I clung to it. That pain was the only thing that felt real in that moment. My father, Vincent, cleared his throat, trying to dispel the awkwardness. "Well then," he said with a magnanimous smile, "let us raise a glass to the future, to Isabella and the De Luca estate." My mother, Sophia, beamed, trying to pull reality back to her perfect script. Isabella was basking in the whispered congratulations from nearby relatives, her face lit with undisguised triumph. They were trying to step over me, to erase my presence as if I were a mere stain on the linen tablecloth. And then, a small sound rang out, but it landed with the force of a thunderclap. Clink. A clear, metallic, resonant sound. Every eye immediately shot to the end of the long mahogany table. My grandmother, Matilda De Luca, was sitting there. She had been silent the entire evening, a small elegant figure in a dove-gray silk dress. She hadn't even touched her lamb. But her eyes, an astonishing shade of sapphire blue even at 80, had not been silent at all. They were as sharp as knives, and they were fixed directly on her son, my father. She had just gently tapped her silver spoon against her crystal water glass. Just once. "Mother," my father began, his voice laced with annoyance. "We're celebrating. Everything is fine." "Vincent," my grandmother said, and the entire cellar seemed to hold its breath. Her voice wasn't loud, but it resonated, carrying the weight of decades and an undeniable authority. "You just spoke of legacy. But do you truly understand what legacy is?" My father blinked, clearly taken aback. "Of course I do. It's this land, it's the—" "No," she cut him off, her voice cold. "You are mistaken. Legacy is not land or oak barrels. Legacy is character. It is honor. It is integrity. It is the intangible thing we carve into our name and pass down to the next generation. And tonight," she paused, her sharp gaze sweeping over my mother, then to Isabella, "the three of you have worked together to shamefully tarnish it." My mother's face went pale. Isabella opened her mouth to protest, but one look from our grandmother silenced her. My grandmother turned to my mother. "Sophia, you were once a strong woman, but you have let fear and vanity turn you into a weak accomplice. You have poisoned your own family by nurturing one child and abandoning the other." Then, those sapphire eyes landed on Isabella. The anger in them seemed to soften, replaced by a profound disappointment that was almost pity. "You are beautiful, Isabella. But beauty, like a bottle of wine, if it has no substance within, will quickly turn to sour vinegar. You have been given everything in the world, and because of that, you value nothing. You mistake indulgence for love, and inheritance for achievement." The cellar was utterly still. The only sound I could hear was the frantic pounding of my own heart in my ears. In the stunned silence, my grandmother did something no one expected. She calmly opened her vintage leather handbag, took out a checkbook and a gold fountain pen. The click of the pen's cap echoed in the quiet space. With deliberate, steady movements, she wrote on the check. The scratching of the nib on paper sounded like a verdict being written. When she was done, she folded the check and stood. She was a small woman, but as she walked the length of the table, everyone leaned away as if making way for royalty. She stopped right beside me. My whole body was still locked in shock. She placed her thin, warm hand on my shoulder, and then she put the check into my trembling one. $5 million, Alara, she said, her voice now gentle but still powerful, loud enough for everyone in the cellar to hear. "This is not charity. This is an investment. I am investing in the only person in this room who understands the meaning of building something from nothing." Every word she spoke was a healing balm, soothing the wounds that had been carved into me just minutes before. It wasn't just money. It was validation. It was vindication. "Grandma." Isabella was the first to break the silence, her voice shrill with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "How could you? I'm the heir. This isn't fair." "Fair?" My grandmother turned back, one eyebrow arched. "You dare to speak of fairness, Isabella, after you just offered to gift your sister a charity case of wine from the very land that should have also been hers?" The initial shock in me began to recede, replaced by something else, a fire. My grandmother's validation gave me strength. I slowly stood up, the check held tight in my hand. It felt heavy, not with its monetary value, but with the weight of freedom. I looked directly into Isabella's eyes, which were blazing with jealousy. "You were right, Isabella," I said, my voice steady and clear for the first time all night. "You'll send me a case of the Alara Reserve every year, and I held up the check slightly, "will use this money to buy a distillery if I want to. That's the difference between being handed something and earning it, little sister." Isabella's beautiful face twisted in fury. I didn't stop there. I turned to my parents, who were staring at me as if I were a stranger who had just grown a second head. "Do you remember grounding me for 2 weeks for a B+ in 10th grade history?" I asked, my voice ice cold. Meanwhile, Isabella broke a priceless 18th century vase and was rewarded with a pony to console her. "You didn't disinherit me tonight. You've been doing it for a very long time, with 1,000 tiny injustices you thought I would forget. Tonight was just the official announcement." "Alara, how dare you?" My father sputtered, his face crimson with shame and rage. "I dare because I have nothing left to lose," I retorted. "You made sure of that. You said I didn't need this burden. You were right. I don't need it. I don't need your hollow approval. I don't need a place in this perfect family play anymore." The cellar descended into chaos. My mother began to sob, tears of humiliation. My father looked as if he was about to have a stroke. Isabella was screaming something about betrayal. In the eye of the storm, my grandmother was a pillar of calm. She walked to my side, placing her hand on my shoulder once more. "Don't waste a single tear on them, my dear," she said softly, for my ears only. "Go build your own empire." With that she turned, and with a regal poise no one could match, she walked out of the wine cellar, leaving a family in the process of tearing itself apart. I stood there, amidst the wreckage of what was once called a family, clutching the check. It wasn't a piece of paper anymore. It was a key. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely and utterly free. I didn't stay for the fallout. I walked out of that wine cellar and didn't look back. The sound of my mother's broken sobs, and my sister's enraged shrieks fading behind me. The drive away from the DeLuca estate felt surreal. The cool Sonoma night air rushed in through the open window of my car, smelling of damp earth and freedom. Each mile I put between myself and that place felt like I was shedding a layer of skin I had been trapped in my entire life. The $5 million check lay on the passenger seat, a stark white rectangle in the darkness. It didn't feel real. None of it did. I wasn't euphoric. I was numb, hollowed out by a strange cocktail of grief and relief. I was grieving the family I had always wanted but would never have, and relieved that the long, painful charade was finally over. The road ahead was unwritten for the first time, a prospect that was both terrifying and utterly exhilarating. The first week passed in a blur. I didn't answer the dozens of calls from my parents or the venomous text messages from Isabella. I needed silence. I needed to let the echoes of that night settle. I spent my days on long, solitary walks, trying to process the tectonic shift that had occurred in my life. The anger was still there, a hot coal in my gut, but it was being replaced by something else. A quiet, focused calm. A few days later, my grandmother, Matilda, appeared at the door of my minimalist city apartment. My home was a world away from the rustic, heavy-handed opulence of the vineyard. It was all clean lines, glass, and cool tones of gray and white, a space I had built for myself, by myself. She walked in, her small frame as poised and elegant as ever, and looked around with an appreciative eye. "It's just like you, Alara," she said, her voice soft. Orderly, intelligent, and with a clear view of the world. She didn't press me to talk about my feelings. Matilda was never one for sentimental theatrics. Instead, she was practical. We sat on my balcony overlooking the city skyline, sipping tea as the afternoon sun cast long shadows. "Your father, Vincent," she began, her gaze distant. "He was much like Isabella. Your grandfather, my Marco, built that winery from dust and dreams. He was a brilliant, hard-working man. But he adored Vincent, saw him as his legacy in the flesh, and he gave him everything too easily. Vincent never had to truly fight for anything. He inherited a thriving empire, and his only real job was not to run it into the ground. He sees your independence not as a strength, but as a rejection of the easy path he represents, the path he wanted for you both." Hearing this added a new, tragic layer to the story. It wasn't just about me and Isabella. It was a pattern, a generational flaw passed down like the family name. "I see so much of Marco in you," she continued, her sapphire eyes meeting mine. The intensity of her gaze was a physical force. "He had that same fire, that same need to build something from nothing. That's why I made my investment." "What if I fail, Grandma?" The question slipped out, a whisper of the fear that had been lurking beneath the surface. "What if I lose it all? What if they were right about me?" Matilda reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Her skin was thin and soft, but her grip was surprisingly strong. "Failure is just data, Alara. You know that better than anyone. You learn from it. You iterate. And you build a better version. You built an entire company from a single line of code. This is just a different language to learn. And the best revenge, my dear, is not in watching them fail. It is in building an empire so vast that their vineyard becomes nothing more than a footnote in your story." Her words weren't just comforting. They were a call to action. They were permission to be ruthless, to be ambitious, to be bigger than the small box my family had tried to put me in. For the next 2 hours, we didn't speak of family. We spoke of strategy. She, with her old world wisdom, and I, with my new world tech savvy, mapped out a plan. She gave me the names of her personal lawyer and a notoriously shrewd financial advisor in San Francisco. "Tell them Matilda DeLuca sent you," she said with a wry smile. "They owe me a few favors." By the time she left, the numbness inside me had been replaced by a thrumming, electric sense of purpose. The $5 million check was no longer a symbol of my family's rejection. It was seed money. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up, my laptop open, my mind racing. I wasn't just planning to invest the money. I was planning to build. 6 months passed in a whirlwind of spreadsheets, pitch decks, and legal consultations. I created a holding company, Matilda Innovations, in my grandmother's honor. I assembled a small, brilliant team of people I trusted. We were agile, we were hungry, and we were hunting for opportunities. I didn't look back at my old life. I didn't have the time. The echoes from the vineyard had grown faint, almost non-existent. Then, one rainy Tuesday, I got a call from my cousin, Sophia, Aunt Elena's daughter. We were never close, but she was the family's foremost gossip. "Ilara? Oh my God, you answered," she said, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Have you heard what's happening at the estate? It's a complete train wreck. A grim sense of vindication, cold and sharp, pierced through me. I tried to sound indifferent. I've been busy, Sophia. What's going on? What isn't going on? She said, launching into a breathless tirade. Apparently, Isabella's reign as the new queen of DeLuca wines was a catastrophe of epic proportions. Her first act was to fire the vineyard manager, a man named Luis, who had worked the land for 40 years and whose hands knew every vine like his own children. She replaced him with a 25-year-old brand consultant she'd met at a club in LA. Her next move was to pour an obscene amount of money into a rebrand. The classic, elegant DeLuca labels were replaced with something minimalist and trendy that, according to my cousin, looked like a cheap perfume bottle. She spent nearly $500,000 renovating the tasting room into an Instagrammable experience, complete with a neon sign that read, Vino Vidi Vici. But the real disaster, Sophia continued, her voice dripping with schadenfreude, was the influencer party. She flew in 24 of these social media people, put them up at 5-star hotels, and threw this massive party. The goal was to create viral buzz. Well, it went viral all right. One of them got drunk and tried to ride one of the antique wine barrels like a horse and broke the whole thing, spilling hundreds of gallons of our best Cabernet. Another one posted a live video making fun of the tacky new decor. The whole thing was an embarrassment, and I heard from Dad that they didn't get a single new distribution deal from it. My parents, of course, were in complete denial. They were defending Isabella to anyone who would listen, blaming a volatile market and disloyal staff for the mounting problems. Worse, Sophia said she'd heard they had taken out a second mortgage on their primary residence to cover Isabella's spending. They were throwing good money after bad, doubling down on their catastrophic mistake. She's selling off assets too, Sophia added, her voice dropping lower. Uncle Vincent had to sell that small parcel of land on the west slope, the one with the original Zinfandel vines Grandpa planted. He sold it to the competition, Alara. Can you believe it? To fund Isabella's new Rose Garden meditation labyrinth, or whatever the hell she's planning now. I felt a pang, not of sadness, but of pity for the land itself, for the legacy my great-grandfather had built, now being dismantled for a meditation labyrinth. After I hung up, I stood by my window, watching the rain streak down the glass. The news didn't make me happy. It didn't make me sad. It just made me feel distant. The chaos at the vineyard felt like a story about someone else's family, a noisy, messy drama happening on a faraway planet. My phone buzzed. It was an email from my lead analyst with the subject line, Project Apex, Q3 projections. I opened it. On the screen were charts, graphs, and data points for the new venture we were launching, a disruptive beverage tech company that used AI to create personalized, sustainable drink formulas. It was ambitious, it was innovative, and it was entirely mine. I looked at the meticulous plans for my future, then thought about the crumbling echo of my past. My grandmother was right. Their world was getting smaller every day, imploding under the weight of its own arrogance. Mine was just beginning to expand, and it was going to be vast. A year went by. A year of sleepless nights, of tense meetings, and of a focus so intense I had never known it before. My company, Matilda Innovations, was no longer an idea on paper. It had become a force. We had successfully launched our first product, a smart beverage system for high-end restaurants, to industry-wide acclaim. My name began appearing in business journals, not as the daughter of a wine family, but as a founder, a visionary. I was so busy building my future that I had almost forgotten my past. But the past has a way of returning, usually when you least expect it. The first call came from my mother on a September afternoon. I was in my office, reviewing the architectural plans for our new lab. Her number flashed on the screen, and for a second, my heart seized. I hadn't spoken to her since that fateful night. I took a deep breath and answered, keeping my voice professional, cool. Alara, darling, my mother's voice came through, artificially thin and trembling. It's been so long. I wanted to see how you were." "I'm fine, Mother," I replied, my voice even. "I'm busy." "Oh, of course," she said quickly. "I read about your company. It's so impressive." There was a pause, and then she went on. "Listen, Ilara, things have been a little difficult." She launched into a long, pitiful story about a declining wine market, untrustworthy business partners, unforeseen expenses. She never mentioned Isabella's name once. It was as if my sister were a victim of circumstance, and not the architect of the collapse. "Your father and I were always thinking," she continued, her voice now drenched in self-pity, "that family is for being there for each other in difficult times, that we would always support one another." And then she drew the knife. "With your success, I was wondering if you might be in a position to help the family business, as an investment, just to keep the legacy from falling apart, for your grandfather's sake." Her audacity stunned me. She was using the very legacy she had ripped from my hands to beg for my help. My composure didn't waver. "Mother," I said, each word clear and cold as ice, "that legacy is no longer mine. You made sure of that on your anniversary night. I can't invest in something I have no stake in. Good luck with your investment in Isabella." I hung up before she could reply. My hand didn't shake. I felt no anger. I felt nothing. A few days later, Isabella called. This call was different. It began with racking sobs. "Ilara, I'm so sorry," she cried. "I was a fool. I was so stressed. I didn't know what I was doing. Everything is a mess, and I don't know what to do." I was silent, letting her play out her drama. "I need you," she said, her voice growing urgent. "You were always the smart one. You always knew how to fix things. Mom and Dad are falling apart. I can't carry this alone." Then, her desperation gave way to her true nature, her deep-seated entitlement. "Grandma gave you that money. It should have been for the family. It's too much for one person. You just have to lend me some of it. Just a little. We can fix everything. You owe the family that." A dry, humorless laugh escaped my lips. "I owe you?" I asked, the sarcasm in my voice unhidden. "Let me tell you what I remember, Isabella. I remember you telling me I didn't need the burden of that land. I remember you promising to send me a charity case of the Ilara Reserve every year. I'm still waiting." "You don't understand," she began to stammer. "Oh no, I understand perfectly," I cut her off. "I built my own world, just like Mom and Dad said. I worked for it. I took my own risks. I celebrated my own successes. Now it's your turn. Do it yourself." I ended the call, and that was the last time I ever spoke to my sister. The final news didn't come in a phone call, but in an email from my grandmother's lawyer. It was a public notice. The DeLuca estate, after nearly a century, had gone into foreclosure. The bank had taken possession. It was over. The DeLuca era had ended not with a bang, but with a humiliating whimper. The next day, I drove to my grandmother's house. She was in her garden, calmly pruning her rose bushes. She didn't look sad. She looked peaceful. "I heard the news," I said softly, sitting on the iron bench beside her. She nodded, not looking up from her flowers. "Empires rise and fall, Ilara. Marco built one with sweat and integrity. His son let it rot with pride, and his granddaughter destroyed it with vanity." She set down her pruning shears and finally looked at me. Her blue eyes were clear. "But you," she said, her voice filled with a quiet pride that made me want to cry. "You are building a new one, and it will last, because it is not built on land that can be sold. It is built on a much stronger foundation. It is built on your mind." As we sat there in comfortable silence, my phone buzzed. It was a news alert from a major tech journal. I opened it. The headline jumped out at me. Matilda Innovation signs global strategic partnership, reshaping the future of the beverage industry. I showed the phone to her. She read it, and a brilliant, genuine smile spread across her face. "There," she said simply. "That is legacy." We didn't say anything more about my family. We didn't need to. That evening, I stood in my office on the top floor of a skyscraper. The city lights spread out below me like a galaxy of fallen stars. The ashes of the DeLuca estate were cold. The pain and anger that had once consumed me were now a distant memory. I had forgiven them. Not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. The burden of the past was lifted, and I felt light. I was no longer Ilara, the abandoned daughter. I was Ilara, the founder of Matilda Innovations. I was a survivor. I was a builder. My legacy would not be written in wine and bitter family feuds. It would be written in code, in innovation, and in a strength I had found all on my own. And the future from up here looked vast and brilliant.